Mr. Chomsky. I'd like to touch on just kind of going back to what he said about the difference between communication and the study of language, and how you think, because as I understand it, some neurologists believe that a lot of emotional communication comes from kind of a musical expression in the right brain, while more data-based communication comes from language in the left brain. How do you think your concept of language explains how language can express emotion in communication?
Well, you know, it's not a dogma that language and communication are about the same thing. But if you think about it, it's extremely implausible. For one thing, almost any behavior you carry out communicates something. A gesture, a hairstyle, almost anything. So sure, language behavior also communicates something. First of all, beyond that, almost all language is not involved in communication. And we all know that. I mean, you can't go 1 minute without talking to yourself. I mean, it takes a tremendous effort of will not to be doing whatever you're doing when what's going on in your head. Well, that's plainly not communication. You're doing it yourself. That's about 99.9% of the use of language. Now, in fact, when you really think, it's never been investigated, but if you introspect about it, it could be investigated seriously, you know, from kind of third-person point of view, but hasn't been. So you can only sort of think about it yourself. But I can only tell you my introspections. You can figure out yours. But my introspections are that when I am thinking in language, it's not really language. There's just like an occasional word will flit along, and I know what I want to say, and then I can express it somehow, sometimes, either internally or externally. But if it's the same for you, then that suggests that there's some kind of language use going on in there that isn't even using the articulated language system. And it's just kind of hovering in there somewhere. Occasionally bits and pieces come out, and if you try, you can say them to yourself or say them outside. And you know when you get it right, which means that you must have meant something, and the articulation that you produce can match what you meant. But what you meant is in some internal language. And furthermore, even if you look at the part of language, a very small part that's external, you know, like what we're doing, a very small part of that is communication in a serious sense. I mean, a lot of it is just setting up social relations, telling jokes to your friends, you know, passing time. I mean, it's not communication in a meaningful sense of the word communication. So I think it's just a big mistake to identify communication with language.